welcome listeners to this episode of Liss and Kristi. Today we have somebody that I am so grateful that we just kind of discovered out of the heavens. Now I'm going to say, let me give a little intro. When we started the podcast, we thought, okay, how are we going to find like a really cool eclectic group of people we want to interview or have on or talk to, and just get to know that we otherwise wouldn't come into contact with. And
Right.
so there is this great resource called Podcast Guests. I mean, where you just go on and you literally find people who maybe have the common interest, or something cool you want to talk about. And we hadn't even filmed anything yet. And Kristi launched our profile. And our guest today
Was the first person that reached out.
was the first person that reached out. And so, we kind of forgot about it and went on, started filming, and we were getting our Riverside, our virtual kind of interview segment set up. And thank you for your patience with us, by the way, to our guest. And after having researched him and discovering everything he's built in this whole entity, and without dragging this on too long, he is an antique dealer and storyteller and comedian and histrionic.
He has all the bodies buried. Literally, it just has a for sale tag on it.
Yeah, on his porch store, right?
Yeah.
So without any further introduction, or
I'm Duane Scott Cerny. I'm the co-owner of Broadway Antique Market in Chicago, which is the oldest and largest mid-century modern store in the city. And I'm also the author of Selling Dead People's Things, and my latest book is Vintage Confidential, Retro-rated.
And you're also working on a new book.
I'm working on a lot of things.
Do you have a working title?
Yes, but
He is not at liberty to share
I'm
that
declining
with you.
sharing it.
Okay.
I'll give you like a bit of a backstory. Remember Hurricane Sandy?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so I was in New York for a writing group that I was invited to participate in, and the year prior I was unable to do it, and I contacted the woman who was conducting this group. And I said, you probably don't remember me. I'm the guy who, had to cancel. And she goes, I remember you. No one ever cancels. And that woman is Gretchen Cryer, who is John Cryer's mother.
Oh, wow.
From
The actor.
Two and a Half Men. And she's phenomenal. She's the first, Gretchen Cryer and her partner, whose name I'm forgetting. But they were the first two women to write a musical and have it be on Broadway. They performed it and toured all over the world.
Wow.
And now she's a little bit older and she's a writing coach. So it's a long story, but so I get in this class, and it was a reality show in and of itself, because there were about a dozen of us, and you had to do the writing right there. And she would give you assignments like write down the 3 most horrible things that ever happened to you. And then she'd go around and say, write number 2, write number 1, blah, 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 blah. And then you had 10 minutes to do it, and then you had to perform it, right?
Wow.
This was unbelievable, because the people wrote about molestations and alien abductions, and and this all had to be true. They all had to be true stories to the person. And every week someone would drop out. Sometimes at a break, someone didn't even come back. And all this was lovely. It was in her apartment, which was beautiful, and people there, but it was a little bit cutthroat still. And I wrote a story that I was really, really proud of, and got up and did it. And basically, the instructor and the class said, bullshit, you can't write fiction. That didn't happen. And I was devastated, because I've been doing really well. Every week I was like in the top 3. I was, and the people in the group were, oh my gosh, there was a woman who, they were just award winners and published authors. And I thought, I am like way, way over my head. So I went back to Chicago with my tail between my legs. And I was so annoyed that one story just didn't hit, because I thought it was good. And I sat down and I thought, you know what? I didn't tell it accurately. I didn't tell it with enough believability. It just so I rewrote it, another dozen, 20 times. I don't even remember. And on a lark, because I don't send things off anymore to be rejected. I've been rejected my whole life, like all of us, right?
Right.
And on a lark, I sent it off to the New York Times, which freaking published it. And let me tell you, to get something into the New York Times, and this was right after a Million Little Pieces. Remember that Oprah
Right,
story?
right. James Fry.
All the yeah, right. So they're not. So to get something in there and be vetted, it's like an atomic colonoscopy. Yeah. Quite unpleasant. And I only had like 2 facts wrong, so I was really proud of myself. Now this is back, a number of years. So Traces of a Man Who Disappeared, and anyone who wants to read it can just Google those words, because it's still on the New York Times site and it's all over the place. And it was prescient in that it came before a lot. I don't want to give away the. I always say my stories are kind of like jokes. Though
Right. You want to give away the punchline.
They might be right. You don't want to give away the punchline. Thank you. But it was just early on in these topics that would later arise with gender and sexuality and the preconceived notions that we've all had, straight or gay or anything in between. So it was really early in that. So there was it got a lot of attention. Let's put it that way. And some hate mail, which was great.
Right.
And then I realized, you know what? I am onto something, because nobody writes about the business that I'm in. And I know, hundreds of dealers, and everybody is always like, oh, I got a story for you. You won't believe what happened, last Saturday morning at the estate sale or whatever. And I just thought, no one ever writes about these things. And we love sharing them between ourselves. But I thought, the public might be interested in something like that. So I culled together, I say my favorite 20, 25 true stories. And I had that. And then I had also written a book, which was kind of how I got started in the business. And I wasn't sure which book I was really writing. And a friend of mine, Mark Contorno, who is I call him my dramaturge, or turd, if we don't agree. We actually just laid out both manuscripts all over the floor, chapter, and then looked at it. And it was great to have. This is such a good lesson really for everybody when you're totally stuck, right? Bring somebody else in who you trust. They give you a completely different perspective, because you're just too close
Of
to
course.
the item, to the product. And it is, in this regard, I still regard writing as a product, because you have to sell it, unfortunately. Excuse me. And that's how we assembled it. So it's an odd structure to the book, but most people seem to get it. So I tell you a little bit about me.
It's a flow.
It definitely has flow.
Yeah, I tried to. And so so when it came to the audiobook and the 18 hours of recording it, that was a blast. And it was also a chance to go and kind of, bring back some of my rustier skills. And so thank you, because I think this is the first time anyone's ever acknowledged that they listened to the audio.
Well, I wrote you the other day and I said something about the audiobook, and you said, well, I don't think anyone has reviewed it. And I thought, the world is missing out. They are missing out, because you're right on the, the fact that so many dealers, I'm sure, all of the, anybody who's been in the business for a long time.
Especially mid-century, and that's had such a big resurgence in the last few years.
Right. But I feel like, I grew up kind of up in that area in Iowa, and I remember growing up, and my mom was an antique, collector, and just how you grow up through life. And my grandma would always take me to estate sales and buy dresses for me and old hats. And she actually was just here and told a story about how she thinks a man, maybe his wife filed for divorce because she was selling a bunch of her antique hats at this estate sale, and she had gone off for lunch, and we wandered up to the sale, and I fell in love, and this man saw me playing with these hats, which I think were worth a fortune. And he's like, oh, you can have them for $5. And my grandma knows without a doubt that woman came home that day, and he might have lost an appendage.
Her mind.
But There are, and you're right. It's like an access to this underground storytelling of life because the twists and the turns that your stories take in the book, you never see coming.
That's what makes a good story,
Right.
period. And I often say that it's not like these things happen every week, every month, even every year. I mean, they just don't. But when they do, it's kind of write it down and pay attention.
So that was going to be one of my questions is over the course of the years, have you kind of been this little squirrel journaler who at
Oh
the
yeah,
end of your workday, you'll come home and
yeah. Well, and my business partner Jeff Nelson would often be annoyed with me because we're at sales and I'm supposed to be on one end of a sofa, carrying it out, and instead I'm scribbling little notes. Now, who is this person? What did they do? Who were their friends? How long have they lived here? 1,000
Because
questions.
think
Shut up
about
and
it,
pick up the sofa.
antiques.
You know.
Antiques, you're buying somebody's story as well as the product.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. The history of it, and so often people. It depends on the person. They're waiting for someone to ask them. They're waiting to tell the story. That it's not just the stuff. And somebody cares enough. They're not just buying this. They want to know. They want to know about my aunt. They want to know about my mom. They want to know about my brother, whatever. It just comes flooding out, which I understand now, but it's taken a lot of years to kind of get a feel for that in the right
A deeper appreciation.
Yeah, and also the right way to handle. I think I say in the book. I mean, you have to be, part businessman, part priest, part rabbi, part social worker, part grief
Part therapist.
therapist. Exactly. And
But I feel like on the flip side of that, the people buying it also are so often invested in, I want to know more about this. Like, where did it come from?
yeah,
I mean, there's how many Facebook pages I follow for antiques, and every day people are posting, oh my gosh, I just got this. And they go viral.
yeah. Well, and there's more and more interest in this now, especially with younger people. And I have to say, 10 years ago, that was not the case. So vintage now was kind of on a completely different level in that, I would say kids, but under 30. um, they like that it's green, and it's reducing my carbon footprint, and I'm recycling all those words which existed before but really weren't embraced. And so the buyers have changed. And then also too, not everything has a story. Customers often say, what can you tell me about this? And it'll be absolutely nothing. I got nothing. I mean, for the most part, say, oh, this came from a North Shore estate, or this came from here, or this came from there. But every once in a while, I do have a story with that item. Only if I know I'm not making this baloney up, and that is kind of fun. That is, I can tell them more than they even want to know. In some cases.
Do families a lot of times will come to you and let's say somebody's an aunt or a mother or grandmother has passed on and they say, would you just go through and take over this estate? How do you come to acquire all your pieces?
That's really good question. We're usually brought in by this point in my life, either in the beginning of something or at the end of something. In that, I don't run estate sales, which is like
Right.
a nightmare. I cannot imagine. But a lot of places, let's just say certain condo buildings or gated communities, or for whatever reason, you can't have a sale, so you have to be invited in privately. And that's just, people have heard of us, and we show up. But if there's so I'm either brought in before there's a sale or after there's a sale, and then it's just things that did not sell.
Tell us about some of the pieces maybe that you've come across. I have to give you a little bit of background. 20 plus years ago, I just gotten married, and my husband and I moved to Oklahoma City, and we had an afternoon to find a house. And we were moving there, and he sold his company, and it was, just a kind of a sudden move, but didn't know anybody there. And we had found a house, and we said, okay, this is going to be it. And the realtor was going to write it up. And he left and went back to another meeting. And I left with the realtor. And as we're driving out, I see this other house. And it's kind of needs some TLC. And it looks like a Palm Springs flat, mid-century. And I said, what is that house? And she said, oh, you don't want that house. That house needs lots of attention. Of course, it was a lot less money than the house that we were looking at. And I said, do you mind if we just look at it? It's really drawing me in. It was a John Lautner, Arthur Elrod masterpiece and had not been touched since the 60s.
Yeah.
I nearly exploded. That was the house we ended up buying.
Of course.
And absolutely, I fell in love with mid-century. I mean, I had this big love affair, but ever since I've had such a big place in my heart for it. And, I just see the things and think about all the different, I go online and see the vintage stores. And
Right.
I just love mid-century.
And
It's such a great time.
look how purchasing that house in a great way changed your life.
Yes.
It changed
It
your
was
life.
one of the first homes ever photographed for Architectural Digest.
Wow.
And they came back 40 years later and reshot.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Isn't that a wonderful story?
Yeah. It's having an appreciation for these things, and not. I will segue here because I think it kind of fits. It also goes into well, somebody will be buying something, and I'll say, so you collect these? Why are you buying this? And they'll say, it spoke to me.
Mm-hmm.
And that house spoke to you.
It
Now,
spoke
on
to me.
one level, you could say it's certainly it's a visual thing, and we're not going to get all new agey here. But I do embrace this because it's an expression we use all the time. It spoke to me. It spoke to me. It spoke to me.
Well, it was a year and a half reconstruction to get it back.
Oh,
to
yeah.
where the love it needed to have.
Yeah.
But I just couldn't bear the thought that somebody was going to raise it and tear it down.
Right. But on first sight, it spoke.
First sight, before I ever
First
walked
sight.
in,
Yeah.
it absolutely grabbed me.
I've got to get in this house. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I've certainly done that with there was when you asked about one of the more interesting sales, there were a house that was just it was just very badly remodeled over the years, and they just kept building another floor and another floor. And it was an old house. They just kept adding another floor, and I'd always wanted to get in there. And one day a guy walks in and he says, "Oh, I'm clearing out my mother's house, and I'm going to move down to Florida. And would you come see it?" And I said, "Oh, sure." And he gives me the address, and of course, it's that house. It's the house I'd always wanted to get into. It was in the neighborhood, but it's like, okay, what are the odds of that? And here it had been, his mom's house. This is one of the stories in the book. And she'd lived there for entire life. And during the probably the 50s and 60s, to pay the taxes, she turned it into a boarding house. So, and it had been a beautiful house at one time, but it was pretty much, it was like 4.5 stories, which is really tall for an old home, and badly remodeled. I said it was like early Matthew Brady bunch is how I described the interior, because some of it was just very 1880s, 1890s, and a lot of it was just 1970s. But she would rent out to gentlemen these rooms, and when they would fall behind on their rent, she would nail their doors shut. and I'd ask, well, were some of the people in the room when she that was my first thought. And he goes, well, it's a 4-story drop. And it was actually on that, and again on the, so they lived on the first floor, and then the second, third, and fourth were just all these rooms. It's basically an SRO, and it's also very sad. It just is. But I certainly connected with this gentleman and the things he wanted. One of the houses got to get cleared out, and he actually handed me a hammer, and we went up the stairs, and he himself hadn't gone into these rooms in decades.
Wow.
And we opened up the rooms, and again, sad, but there were things there. There was a lot of old liquor bottles, a lot of old Las Vegas ashtrays, a lot of.
I love
But
that.
but everyone though had its own little flavor, and there was a guy who was into film, so he had projectors and 16 millimeter projectors and films, and another guy had birds, so he had bird cages, and went on and on. Another one was a writer, and he had this beat up desk, and you could just get this sense of who had lived there.
Right. Feel their presence.
What,
Over the decades, yeah. And of course, it's a dirty business. So it's your mascot.
But like, what a time capsule treasure trove to walk
Right.
into that
Yeah.
day. I mean,
So when you ask about value, and certainly the dealers will disagree with me, but to me, it's not about the money. It's great if I find things that I can resell, and the oddest things people buy. Something I point out because people don't even think about it, but even 10, 15 years ago, I was selling, and I still do, but I can find it, is film. You think about cameras, and you take your pictures.
Right.
You'd have an actual film. Well, we don't have film anymore. There's no film. We have all these photos on our cameras that we don't even print up. But if you think about this, when people were taking a photo, and then that photo, of course, is an object, it becomes a thing. It's now a physical thing. It's basically a small detail, but to me, I get kind of excited. So you not only have the photo, but you have this negative. Well, forever, people just threw up negatives. Of course, they threw up negatives. Well, people now, the kids, collect negatives for all types of things, and they repurpose them. And go on Etsy.
hold on, I gotta call my Mimi. She's sitting on a fortune.
Well, I mean, and they don't sell for a lot, but it's something that was actual garbage is desirable. And think about it. There's really no more film, unless you're a professional photographer, and that's a whole other matter. But
one man's trash is another man's treasure.
Well, yeah. And then when I kind of caught on to early, and then of course and then telling all the people who do the clean outs, don't throw out any film you find. Okay. It's flammable. Yes. And so then people would give me just bags and bags and bags of film. Well, and they were before. Now I can't even get it. So, See,
Wow.
Why don't you share with us a little bit about your love of Playboy?
Okay. So, my father was a photo engraver, and one of their biggest clients was Playboy here in Chicago. And I always say in Chicago, it's like every third person either worked for Playboy, had some other connection to Playboy, or has signed a document saying that they won't speak about what happened in Playboy.
Present company excluded.
It's just, and it would be, Oprah would be the same thing in many, many ways. And I always make that connection because Oprah was as important to Chicago as Playboy was. So my father, being in the production end of it, would on occasion bring home his work and show it to my mother, who would be horrified, to say the least. And of course I remember one of them was like, well, maybe if Duane saw some of these things, don't show those to Duane. And I was like, oh, yeah. Or Miss March has a chest so large you could put tchotchkes on it. I mean, there was just Miss April had quarter-sized nipples. It was just like, but the thing wasn't. But for the kids in high school, my friends in high school, oh my God, your father does that, blah 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 blah, and that actually made me a little more popular when I wasn't popular at all. And so my father would bring home these prints and then throw them out, and then I would basically, in a very convoluted way, and you can read about it in the book, I would make money off of these things. So I started a little business out of my locker selling Playboy magazines. So when everybody else was smoking dope and getting an STD. I was I was I was selling Playboy magazines out of my lot.
At like
Uh,
9.
and it would, and that just kind of continued in that when I opened my first store, I decided that I wanted to have an adult case that would just be adult merchandise and all vintage and all locked up. And I had a friend of mine, so if you can imagine this like 6, 7 foot wooden showcase, wood on 3 sides, glass on the front. And I had a friend of mine make a great a keyhole. And so, and then I put a red light that blinked inside the case. So you'd have to look through the keyhole to see the merchandise. But then, of course, it would go black. Then it would go red. Then it would go black. Then it would go red. And it was the most popular case in the store.
Oh, I can imagine.
Do you still have it?
We actually, well, it's the 21st century. So now in our present store, now we've kind of cast off the naughtiness of it, which I will admit isn't as much fun. And I've also broadened it in that, I have for don't anybody jump on me, but basically a heterosexual case and a gay case, showcases. They're very clean. Now it's presented it's presented like objects and I would say art.
Right.
They're artifacts. And I will tell you that the mostly who buys Playboy magazines are women. 9 times out of 10, it's women who buy
Will
Playboy.
you just
Vintage
tell
Playboy.
quickly the little story about the woman that collected the cards,
Oh,
playing cards?
sure. Yeah. So we had a elderly lady who would come in who was very, very sweet, and she just looked like everybody's grandmother. And she collected erotica, and
But erotica meaning vintage erotic art.
well, I just call it porn.
Okay.
Jumped into it. So she, okay, this is those naughty playing cards. Well, there's naughty playing cards where it's naked women, but there's also playing cards where there's coupling involved. Let's say that. So she came in the one day, and I knew a deck had come in the week prior, and I go, I got to show you this. So she goes, oh yeah, but first I want to see this one. So she goes and she's going through this other deck of cards, and as she goes through each playing card, she'd say, not dirty enough, not dirty enough, not dirty enough.
And she's somebody's grandmother.
It's somebody's grandma. Oh yeah, she's really serious about it. And then I was like,
All I can see is this little bouffant looking through the keyhole.
Yeah.
So the other one, it was not dirty enough. Well, she liked interracial couples. After a while, I kind of got a feel for just the old.
What year was this?
This is this was in the what was it? The 90s, 97.
Wow.
Yeah, I doubt she's still with us, so she wouldn't mind me telling this anyway. But the punchline to this one was I had a deck of cards, and it was just a single model. It's a very pretty young woman, and I called it the Smoke-a-rama deck because it was just her and a cigarette. And what this woman could do with a cigarette could turn me into a fag. Gotta go with it. It's right there. It's just right there. And she just loved it. She just loved it. I had a hard time looking at it. I got to be honest. So, not that I'm against smoking, but hardly. I think that's a story you're asking.
Yeah.
Yes.
No,
Yes.
it had
Yeah.
me again, absolutely rolling.
Yeah. I may be missing details, but I just remember not dirty enough. Not dirty enough.
No, but I just hope it gives people the absolute enthusiasm to run out and get your Audible and sit there and listen to it and laugh along with you because
Oh.
yeah, I'm curious, like there has to have been moments where somebody came in with like, oh wow, I'm gonna, sell these things. Do you host vendors or is everything in your store yours?
No, so it's a market. So we have 65 other dealers, and many
Oh,
of
wow.
them have been with us for again decades. We were closed for 3 months for COVID, and I didn't lose one person.
Wow, that's a great story.
Well, and I did a lot of things to make sure that happened because I recognize these aren't just dealers. Each person has a family, has a partner. They've got kids. They're putting them through college. They're, everybody's got expenses. So it's be like, this is going to be tough on everybody. So we got to figure out a way to do this. And that was what it was. And I have lots of ideas. Most of them don't work. But for that, because we have huge display windows, the building takes up about a third of a block. So with these huge display windows. So we took as many things as we could, larger things, and piled them in the window with big price tags on them, meaning big, readable, not expensive. And then we created a text phone number just for that. So it was, you just texted the number. And of course, so anybody walking by could take a picture,
That's ingenious.
and you could pay for it over the phone. And then we meet them at the door, and we'd both be like, we're from the Andromedan strain. In those early days, or promises, you know what, can you just leave it outside the door and I'll be right there. And so we would do that.
Doesn't COVID now seem like it was?
It seems like it was a decade ago, but I feel like we're still all living with the lessons we learned or the hardships it caused. But one of the other things that I feel like you've done such a good job of changing with the atmosphere, the climate of
with each decade.
Yeah. But you also did a podcast where you talk about how important it was for you to kind of make your mark in Chicago, and you went to all the other dealers who sold art and or antiques. And you were like, you took them all bottles of wine and said, I just wanted to thank you for all the business you've sent my way. And you said, they didn't know my name. They didn't know my store's name. And they had not sent me any business. But guess what? To this day, they know my name. And most of those stores are now closed.
Yeah.
But just the way that you marketed yourself and were able to look at the big picture. But and throwing back to your childhood days, you talked about your porch store and trading your dad's Playboy stuff and, just walking along and seeing some girl's Barbie playhouse and saying, oh, do you know I can make you some money? You don't need that old toy. Let me help you out with that.
Right.
And
You ever
here you'd walk off with a Barbie dream house. But having that vision to flip and
Right.
it's just innately
That's
part of
something
who you
you're born
are.
with.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really know where that came from. And it's funny because, again, my dad worked for the same company for, oh gosh, I think almost 40 years. And almost everybody in my family at one time or another worked for Sears, which is the other,
Oh, yeah. You talked about the Sears Roebuck catalog,
Sears
and we
Roebuck
both were like,
oh my God.
I hadn't seen that since I was in sixth grade.
but yeah, how many hours would you sit there and, oh, I want that. Oh, I'm going to get this. And
but that's a disturbing Sears Roebuck story. Yeah. I forgot about that one. I love that one. Well, that's another example of going into a place and I should be running around shopping instead. Something happens going like, I'm not leaving. You've opened a situation where something's going to come down.
Right.
And you're going, I'm doing this, but I'm just going to stand here and see what happens, and then you get to witness, either some great argument or I don't know, the Hindenburg exploding. I don't know. You just never know what's going to happen, but you might have a feel for it. So that was the Sears Roebuck story. Sorry.
What about some really great lottery moments where somebody comes in with a box full of stuff and then you discover, oh my gosh, there was an antique diamond ring in here we didn't know was in here, or
the Picasso in Grandma's garage.
Well, I mean, a simple one was Jeff, my business partner, bought a bedroom set, and I had to go with them to go pick it up, and we're always like, did you take everything out? Did you take everything? Did you get everything that you want? And we were always with, anything that you want for your family, please just take it. We don't want to buy that. That's so important. And no one checked the bottom drawer of this dresser, which explained why it was so heavy. And then we get it back to the store and we're taking it all apart and, polishing it all up. And the bottom drawer was filled with jewelry, just filled with jewelry and not costume, good stuff. And it's like, because that's a problem right there. It's a problem. And, I would like to think that most people would go and do what we did, which was call up the person and say, hey, we all have all your jewelry, and which is exactly what we did. But then I was also like, somebody has to say as well, but there was a diamond ring in there, or there was a gold band in there.
Right.
Because, we didn't touch it. It was like, oh. So there's those, that's a very kind of that probably happens more often than not, of people just not fully going through cabinet.
Oh, I know where I've hidden some stuff. Nobody would ever find it. It would
Yeah.
definitely be given
Yeah.
away or thrown out with the
And
trash.
if I hide it, I won't be able to find it myself. So
Although you never know. There was a dealer here in Chicago. He's since retired, but he started out as a garbage man. I mean, he was an antique dealer. He was a garbage man, but he would just be seeing all this great stuff that people would throw out, and that gave him the bug. So when you say one man's trash, sometimes it's literally trash.
I lived with a sofa that I picked up on the trash curb for 5 years. Like, I don't care. I liked it.
Happens all the time. So that was more like a disappointed score, but I'll give you another one. So we bought a pair of designer chairs, and offhand, Adrian Pearsall, I don't remember exactly who they were, but we knew they were good, and we put them up front, and they were, I don't know, this is a lot for us because we're more in the $500 to $1,000 range. We try to have furniture that we've sold to now generations of people. Somebody's kids their first apartment. I love that. It's my first apartment. Everything's from your store. I love that because I was that guy. That's
right.
How I got started. And so we had this pair of chairs, and I think they were like $6,500, something like that. And anybody who came in and looked at it was like, I can do five. I'll do $4,500. I was just like, it was one of those auctions where you're just going downhill, And even dealers would look at them, and I'm going like, what is this? And so finally I said, oh, screw this. There was an auction coming up, and I said, let's see if we can take it. This guy will take it, and we can get our money back. And they sold for $45,000.
wow.
Plus the buyer's premium.
Wow.
How auctions are. But here's the point.
I just got goosebumps.
But here's the point. Anybody, you, the both of you, anybody could have walked in and bought those chairs at I would say a fire sale. But because we're like, okay, and then at an auction, 2 or 3 people wanted it. And,
were you dumbfounded when they called you and said what they'd gone for?
Yeah, that's why
I had to think. Is this a prank? Because I'm in this business and I didn't see the value of that.
Only the fact that it was, and I will give them a shout out to that, which is a Wright 20. So like Frank Lloyd Wright with a W and then 20, which is a auction house that started here in Chicago, and he's got the galleries in New York now, and he's a huge deal as well. He should be, and he was one of our dealers decades ago. So I believe that because of who we sent it to and having a relationship with the auction house, but I just love the fact that anybody could have bought it. I'm still on that one, which shows you can. And people say you're buying something, and if you go to IKEA, want to throw them under a bus. Let's just say IKEA. There's nothing at IKEA that you're going to buy that you can send to an auction or sell at a house sale, make money. It's not going to happen. Early IKEA furniture surprisingly does have value because they were made well, but now it's sawdust and duck beaks or something. I don't know what they what they're made out of, but
you're teaching a lesson about home furnishings and things, tangible items that I've always viewed clothing as. Like, why do I want to go to Dillard's or Macy's and buy some new produced item of clothing when I can go online, buy something that's vintage or couture, made better at a discounted rate? Maybe somebody wore it once before, maybe they never wore it, but I know for a fact I can wear it maybe 5 or 10 times and then resell it for maybe even more than what I paid for it.
Right.
And that lesson in life alone has saved me so much money. It's made me money. And it's so fun.
Vintage fashions, that's a really good point, because vintage fashions and vinyl, I always say, are kind of like the gateway drug of collectibles.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Because you can get college kids are all about vintage clothing and vinyl. Right?
Right.
But you can get them in on that. And both boys and girls. Oh my gosh, So
the kids love to thrift.
They love.
My daughter loves to go to.
I love the Goodwill. Take me anytime to a Goodwill.
I haven't gone that far yet.
One of my favorite things to do is, if going to a new city I've never been before, I'll get online and Google thrift shops, best antique stores, vintage clothing sellers. I mean, I have just scored some of the most outstanding pieces. And for me, clothing, yeah, I can bring an extra suitcase and take that home with me. For you, or furniture, larger pieces, I don't have enough homes that I could decorate with this stuff. But trust me, if the time permits, I'll get there.
Yeah, it's a really good lesson. And I also like to point out that um, when it comes to, like, we call ourselves a market, but a lot of people use the expression malls, and malls have the, rather negative connotation right now, um, or economic reasons. But um, if you think about it, it's really smart to shop. Well, it's absolutely smart to shop resale and vintage stores, secondhand stores, thrift stores. Absolutely. But when you go to a place like mine, again, use the word, these things have been vetted. So you're looking at the best things that we could find.
Right.
So
Right.
that's why we have, like, we've been selling to Japanese dealers, well, other dealers as well, but Japan gets it. Japanese people really get it. And they'll do the same thing, but then they go, I don't have that much time. I want to see the best of the best of the best. Okay, I'm paying a little more, but I know the condition is there. It's, it's been
It's
clean.
not a knockoff.
Do you feel that
Right.
do you feel that eBay kind of brought that back so people could go online? You know, when eBay kind of, what was it, 20 years ago
Yeah.
that they started, and then you could go on and put in mid-century 1950s furniture, bakelite jewelry. I mean, whatever you were looking for, and now people could come in from all over the world.
It had a huge influence on the market, but I would say equally is Antique Roadshow.
Yeah,
Um,
that's true.
Really?
because Antique Roadshow kind of scratches the itch of
Right.
people, in that you're getting to see an object, you're learning about it, and not only from the appraiser, but from the person who then tells you the backstory, which
Right.
you're not going to get. You're not going to get a backstory at Goodwill. Maybe,
Right.
maybe lights, but not a backstory. But
Well, and like, I
kidding.
think a lot of people had that light bulb moment from watching the Antique Roadshow of like, oh, hang on, I know I've
Wait a
seen
minute.
something like
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
laying around my house or my mom's house. Or
Right. And only, well, somewhat recently, I say in the last 5 years, they started showing mid-century modern, and it was like, to me, that was, they get
Gold.
it. They get it, because it's just, when, like I said in the book, when we started out, and people would just say, because we were in our, what was that, 30, people would say, "Oh, you're those 50s dealers. You sell that 50s crap." It was always followed with some, that 50s. It was a negative connotation to it, right? But we were selling it fairly early, and other people were too. But we did it in a much bigger way, and I think just kind of, and presented things, for lack of a better word, artfully, um, and people appreciated that. It's,
But I
it's
remember being in Palm Springs in the 90s and there being resale shops, from all the great old houses in the 50s.
yeah.
And then they would just go clean those out and,
Oh,
the dealers would buy it and
the Palm Springs is the mother lode. It always
the
had.
mother load. Right.
And today, now they have the, modernism shows there with the car shows, the fashion shows, and so it's become a huge thing. Yeah, but I would say, um, whereas Antique Roadshow continues to be kind of that monolith of information, eBay, uh, uh,
it's touch and go.
it's such a, well, it's also, they're kind of late. Just going to be honest. They seem to have kind of an agenda. So it gets a little, they'll, how do I put this? I'm all for things that are, let's just say, racially inappropriate, right? Let's say, like in black memorabilia and things
Oh,
with negative connotations and all that. And years ago, it was like, oh, you can sell anything. And then they said, you know what? We can't do that. And I totally understand that. But they can get a little goofy in that, you can, well, let's say you can sell a Playboy magazine, right?
Right.
But you really can't sell a Play Guy magazine.
oh,
They're, and then we're not talking about genitalia or anything like that. They just have this thing. I think they have a thing about, like, pubic hair. I don't know, chest hair. We'll say, which is, you know, um, it's true.
They're
And
not Burt Reynolds fans.
no, they don't. They're yeah, and other things like that. It kind of has
Every time I think of Playgirl, I don't guess I've ever seen one, but I always think about that. I've seen on TV that fold out, and it's like Burt Reynolds, right?
Burt Reynolds.
Is
Yeah,
it-
well, hey,
right.
come, that was
It was avant-garde back then.
who's the woman he was with the talk show? Sorry, I'm blanking out.
Dinah Shore.
Dinah Shore. Yeah.
Yes.
So I mean, come on, you look at that and you go like, good for Dinah Shore, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
How about the golf tournaments? This is where it's at.
Yes.
But well, there's an
The
example.
Dinah Shore Classic is in Palm Springs.
Yeah, right.
And
Even if you covered up, his junk, you'd have a problem with them. I guess my point is that they've become a lot more conservative. Right?
Wait, it just dawned on me. Did they show him completely nude?
He's got his hand over his.
Oh.
He does this kind of.
Okay.
As Kristi races to the internet to find a copy.
Yeah.
No. And from what I've read, he always said he regretted doing that.
Really?
And if you haven't seen the last movie Star, which was his last movie, it's brilliant.
Really?
Yeah, Burt Reynolds. Yeah, it's really, really good. And it touches a bit a lot of his own. It's almost his story, but anyway.
Okay, so I have to tell you, this past weekend, I went to Georgia and took a little mini vacay and went to one of the most incredible little hidden spots. It may not be hidden for other people, but it's a town of, I guess, about 10,000 people, and it's Covington, Georgia, and it's the movie capital of the South. And there's been over 200 movies filmed there. And in the Vampire Diaries,
Mhm.
the whole town they filmed this for 8 or 9 years in this town. And the Dukes of Hazzard was shot there. In the Heat of the Night, there was a Denzel Washington, but they all go on the movies that are shot there. And I stayed in an Airbnb, and it's where they shot the Vampire Diaries in the Lockwood Mansion. And these two guys that hosted me, shout out to Ralph and Benjamin, their house was so perfectly appointed. And it was, I want to say, 1860.
Mhm.
And they had redone everything down to the seams, but they'd raised the ceilings. They'd done it right. So when you're walking through, nothing's compromised.
Yeah.
And everything's, new, even though it's to look a certain way. And so when you came through and you see the portraits, I said, wow, are these all family? Like, what are the stories behind these? And he goes, oh, we don't know. We just love estate sales. And everything. I mean, but you could tell they had a if I could have put it in my bag and taken it, I would have. But it was a fireplace that was all hand carved that they had gotten in Asia. And at first you would look at it and think, okay, well, maybe this is cast or it's a mold. And then he said, no, it's solid mahogany. And it was like a filigree almost, carving on it. And he's just like, I love everything to have a story. And I appreciated that so much. And I was, of course, getting excited thinking about you being on the show. But that things like that get passed down, and there'll be treasures for somebody else. And maybe they reframe something or put something in a lamp that was just a sculpture. But I felt like a veranda could have come through and absolutely photographed it. And I mean, from the fresh tulips on the table to everything, it was just incredible. And I loved that everything was repurposed and had a story.
Yeah. And used. Yeah. Yeah.
And just loved and appreciated. And I loved it that it's going to go on and that they'll maybe pass, that on to somebody else one day. And, some of these things are 150, 200 years old. And that they, the leaded pane glass windows, just the stained glass. I ate it up. I loved it.
Covington, Kentucky?
Covington, Georgia.
Covington, Georgia. Sorry. Okay.
It's about 35 miles.
She'll send
outside
you
of
the
Atlanta.
link. She'll send it all to
Yes.
you. She's going to want you to be as invested as she is now.
Yes.
Everybody should go.
Yeah, everybody should go.
and stay with Ralph and Benjamin, and they love it. But they had 2 tours a day,
But they Airbnb the cottage house.
the carriage
The
house,
carriage house, yes.
and they all of a sudden I saw all these people coming through, and he said something about the tour this morning. I hope it didn't disturb you. And I was like, tour? I really wasn't sure what he meant. Well, so all of a sudden I look up that afternoon and I'm watching the Masters. There's 35 or 40 people that, paid to see where the Vampire
Oh, yeah.
Diaries was shot. And, they want to come through the gardens. And, it's just amazing to me after even all these years, people are still so invested.
Yeah.
But diehard fan base. Shout out to the Vampire Diary fan base. We should all have people that loyal in our life.
I guess so. For me in the vintage clothes and things is I always buy everything with an idea of what's this going to be worth if I go to sell it. But as you've acquired things, what are some of the things that have surprised you personally of, oh, this is too good to ever let go? Like I can't believe I stumbled upon this little treasure.
So I guess as a personal story, well, so I collect sideshow photography. I kind of paused there because I'm going like I haven't bought anything in quite a while because I haven't found anything that wet my whistle. But we were it's one of those things where you're driving down this 2-lane road in rural Wisconsin, and there's a sign that says barn sale, one of those, and you go, oh, let's check this out. And sure enough, there's a barn, and it's just nobody there, and you just go in, and so there's a milk crate full of just old picture frames, but just the frames, no glass. And you just going through it. People buy frames, and I'm always looking for images. And then there's this little framed photo, and I'm looking at it, and I'm going, so it's a boy, and he's about, I don't know, 12, 13, 14, something like that. And it's very clear that he has 3 legs.
3 legs?
He has 3 legs. It's very
Okay.
clear he has 3 legs. You cannot, and he's got this really nice little suit that, his parents probably bought for him. And it's, and again, this is a turn of the century image. And I immediately knew who it was. It was Franco Lentini, who would later go on to be a sideshow star, have his own circus. He was a big deal. But I've never seen an image of him as a child. So it's like, to me, so I pull it out, and I also took a couple more frames. He's got to sweeten the deal here. Whatever you do it, and that's also, I guess that's also a suggestion for anyone. You find something, don't just bring up one item, bring up a couple things. It'll, even if they're things that you don't want, or you'll regift. It's just, you're kind of peppering the deal. I think somebody's once referred to it as that. And so then I knock on the farmhouse door, and this older lady just opens the screen, and I said, oh, I found some things in the barn. And she goes, oh, you like the frames? Oh, yeah. And I said, and there's a photo, to be honest. And she takes it out of my hands, and I thought, I'm screwed. And then she goes, what a handsome young man. No mention.
She had no idea.
She didn't, just did not notice. How do you not notice? He's got 3 legs, and he's wearing pants, and he has 3 shoes. I don't know how you not notice that. And then she said, oh, $20 for all of it. So, and I still have that in a drawer beside me. But again, I knew who it was. So it's that having a little knowledge, and you can go like, well, that's kind of nutty, but the same thing if you're, thrifting, especially with vintage and couture, not everything's marked, not everything's tagged, the tag's falling off or whatever, but you know what it is.
Right.
So having that knowledge is what can make you, a smarter buyer.
Investor. I want you to tell everybody your address in Chicago so they know exactly
where
where
to find you online.
Find you.
Okie doke. So this is the Broadway Antique Market, which is at 6130 North Broadway in Chicago. And that's on the north side of Chicago, kind of along the lake. From downtown, it's a quick 20 minutes. So we're in the Edgewater neighborhood is what it's called. And you can find us at bamchicago.com. So BAMchicago.com for that. sellingdeadpeoplesthings.com. You can,
Best title
you can
ever.
visit. And again, that's one of those things I heard, and I went and said, "Oh, that's just a great expression." So I can't take credit for it. I just heard it, but it's mine now. And Vintage Confidential is the second book, both available on Amazon, and you support your independent booksellers. I always encourage people to order books through there and help small business. Oh my gosh. I've got a monthly column in the Greenwich Village called The Village View.
Wow.
And that's it. I've been doing that for a year. And the column is called It's All My Fault. Because generally, everything's all my fault.
And we can get that online too.
You get that online. Yep. It's villageview.com. And you can just search, I think, my last name, so Cerny, and you can find things there. Oh my gosh, there's next Friday. This kind of ties back to the music stuff. I've got a music video that made a film festival. Made the cut of the film festival in New York. I just came back from New York, so I can't go to the film festival, which is killing me. But you can also look at that, and then you can search, and it's called Bedbug Love. Bedbug Love.
Well, and we'll link all of it in the box,
Yes.
in the description box. We just wanted people who are listening and on the go to be able to quickly reference you and follow along, and because I just think you're a gem, and I'm so happy we have found and met you. Okay, with all that being said, we're so grateful
Duane,
for you.
we love you.
And can't wait to visit you, whether it's in Chicago or you come to Texas. Or
Thank you. And so, like the audience knows, we really worked to make this one happen.
We did. We almost got
We really
divorced.
did.
We had some technical difficulties a couple days in a row, but
So,
yeah.
You are a jewel. You are a treasure.
Oh,
Duane, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And
this has been fun.
say goodnight, Lucy.
Good night, Lucy.
Liss and Kristi, thank you. Bye-bye.